When retired detective Samuel Grady moved to the quiet town of Ashfield, Oregon, he just wanted a quiet life, away from the sirens, dead bodies and folders full of crime photos. After 32 years on the Portland police force, all he wanted was peace and quiet. He bought an isolated house on the outskirts of Ashfield, where the population was barely 5,000. The house was next to an open field with tall trees, the constant sound of crickets at night, and a breeze that brought the smell of pine and wet earth. It seemed like the ideal place to forget the horrors of the past. It only seemed that way. And before we continue with this intriguing story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps us bring you more content like this. Now let's get back to the story. In the second month after moving in, Samuel noticed something that at first didn't seem important to him. A huge hawk flew over his property in perfect circles, always at dusk. The animal didn't land, it didn't make a sound, it just circled slowly in the sky, as if it were watching something. He even told a neighbor, a man named Hank, who had lived there for over 40 years. "Ah, so the damned thing's back," said Hank, putting down his hoe and wiping his sweat with his forearm. "He's back?" Samuel asked, curious. "That hawk, he's not just any hawk. It chooses houses. When it shows up and starts circling like that, it's only a matter of time before some misfortune happens there." Samuel let out a skeptical laugh. He was a policeman. He had seen unexplained things, yes, but a hawk portending tragedy. He wasn't the type to get carried away by superstition. And what exactly happened the last time it appeared? Hank looked at him with a firm, humorless gaze. In 1997, he flew over the Keller family home. A week later, their 12-year-old daughter disappeared. They never found her again. In 2004, the Johnstons' house, fire in the middle of the night, everyone dead. And in 2013, my sister's house. She was found dead in the bathtub. They said it was suicide, but nobody believed it. The only thing in common in all these cases was the hawk. Samuel frowned. He didn't believe in legends, but he wasn't stupid either. He decided to investigate on his own, more out of habit than real concern. He started by visiting the local police station, where he met Officer Rachel Miller, a hard-working and suspicious young policewoman. "And why is a retired detective interested in birds of prey, Mr. Grady?" Rachel asked, pulling up the history of the cases Hank had mentioned. "Because I'm trying to understand if the problem is the bird or something much more human. The files weren't detailed, but they confirmed that the incidents had happened exactly as Hank had said." Samuel then began to draw a timeline. The hawk would appear, then a few days later a tragedy would occur. Coincidence? Maybe, but it was too soon to conclude anything. Things began to change when he saw, with his own eyes, the hawk flying over another house. It was a 2-story house with windows that were always closed, belonging to a woman called Emily Vargas, who lived there with her young son. He spotted the animal in the distance, circling above Emily's house. He watched it for 10 minutes. The pattern was the same, wide circles, constant slowness, absolute silence. 3 days later, Emily turned up at the police station, desperate. "My son, he's gone. He disappeared from his room in the middle of the night." Samuel felt his blood run cold. There were no signs of forced entry. The doors were locked. The local police began searching, but there were no clues, no witnesses. The boy, just 5 years old, had simply disappeared. That night, Samuel didn't sleep. The hawk didn't appear. His house was silent. But unease was growing. Something was wrong in that town, something very wrong. About a week later, a man known as Gerald Kane, Samuel's neighbor, was found dead on his porch, his eyes wide open, frozen and panicked. Forensics found no marks of violence. A heart attack, they said, but something was bothering Samuel. The hawk had been seen that morning, flying in circles over Gerald's house. Rachel, who had initially treated Samuel with disdain, was now becoming suspicious too. The pattern is too strange. What if the hawk is some kind of marker? She said, looking at the map Samuel kept with the dates, places and names of the victims. Marker? As if it was choosing someone, Samuel asked. Or just showing who's already been chosen. It was at this point that the tone of the story changed completely. When, one clear morning, Rachel went to Samuel's house, visibly pale. "He's flying over your house, Samuel." He left immediately, and there he was, the hawk. Turning slowly, its wings spread like a demon in a summoning circle. Samuel stared at the sky for long seconds. For the first time in years, he felt afraid. "Something is coming," he said, almost whispering. The hawk had chosen him, and now it was only a matter of time. That night, after seeing the hawk flying over his house, Samuel couldn't close his eyes. He sat in the dark of the living room with a .38 caliber revolver resting on his lap. It was an old habit, born of the times when he lived surrounded by criminals, threats, and endless nights. But now the threat wasn't human, and that made him even more vulnerable. The town of Ashfield didn't seem to want to comment on what had been happening. Most residents avoided talking about it. Many pretended not to see the hawk. Others, when asked, looked away or closed the door. It was as if the whole town had learned to survive in silence. Rachel Miller, on the other hand, was beginning to feel the weight of being involved in something that went beyond what her police training could prepare her for. She and Samuel created a sort of informal alliance. They had a common goal: to understand why certain houses were chosen and what exactly the hawk represented. The morning after flying over Samuel's house, the two of them returned to the place where Emily Vargas's boy had disappeared. They searched the room, now dismantled, with the toys still on the floor and the bed intact. But something caught Samuel's eye. "Do you see that?" he said, pointing to the inside of the window. Rachel approached. "Claw marks?" "Exactly. 3 parallel deep scratches, as if some large animal had tried to get in. But on the inside? That doesn't make sense. The window wasn't opened. There's no sign of a break-in. Unless it didn't break in, the thing was already in here." The two of them looked at each other. An unsettling idea was beginning to form, and it got worse with each new piece of information. That same day they met Hank, Samuel's old neighbor, standing in the market with a lost look on his face. He told them that years ago he had seen the hawk up close, but what scared him most wasn't the size of the bird, which in itself was abnormally large. It was what he saw in its eyes. "It was as if it had awareness," said Hank, lowering his tone. "That look, he knew what I was thinking." Rachel took him seriously. Samuel, although suspicious, didn't rule it out. He wrote it all down. On the way back, Rachel proposed something risky. "What if we tried to lure the hawk?" "What for?" "To see what happens. If there's a pattern, if there's something specific it's looking for. Maybe it's the place. Maybe it's the person. I want to understand that, don't you?" Samuel hesitated, but he agreed. Over the next few days, they set up cameras in the house and around the property. They set up microphones, motion sensors, and even tried using the sounds of predatory birds to attract the animal. Nothing happened until the 5th night. It was at 2 in the morning. One of the outdoor cameras captured the exact moment when the hawk first landed on the roof of Samuel's house. It was colossal. Its retracted wings were still wider than the chimney, eyes as dark as pitch, a sharp, curved beak. And one more thing, something was attached to its right paw, a small piece of cloth, stained with dried blood. The next morning, Samuel reviewed the videos with Rachel, and she froze at the sight of the cloth. That's from Emily's son's pajamas. I remember the pattern." Samuel said nothing for long seconds. "Does that mean that the hawk took it? Or that the hawk is somehow involved? But how? There is no bird of prey capable of carrying a child that size. That's impossible," she said, staring at the frozen image of the creature on the roof. Another unanswered question. And then came the next blow. During the morning, the house of a young couple newly arrived in the city was found empty. Door unlocked, kettle on the stove, coffee still hot, but no one inside. Rachel and Samuel were the first to arrive, and when Samuel looked up at the sky, there was the hawk, once again circling overhead. Rachel took a photo with her cell phone and for the first time managed to capture the bird clearly, but what they saw when they zoomed in made them even more upset. "That's not just a hawk," whispered Rachel. "No, there's something wrong with the shape. Look here." Samuel pointed. "The legs, they're too thick, and the eyes almost human." Rachel zoomed in as far as she could, and there, in the corner of the image, appeared what looked like a symbol, a design engraved in the plumage of the bird's chest, as if it had been marked with fire. It was a circle, and inside it something like an eye, so they decided to look for historical records of the city. They went to the small local museum, where they met a lady called Agnes, almost 90 years old, who looked after the historical archives. When they heard about the hawk, Agnes went pale. "This has happened before, a lot before." "Do you remember any similar stories?" Rachel asked. "More than remember, I lived it. I was 10 when my brother disappeared. The last thing he said was, 'The bird is watching me.' Nobody believed him. Then it was the neighbor's turn. Then another. Our parents started forbidding us to leave the house after dark. Agnes took the two of them to the archives and showed them an issue of the city's newspaper from 1937. The headline read, "Panic among residents after series of mysterious disappearances." Below, a sentence, "All under the flight of the hawk." Samuel then found an essential clue, the name of an old resident, the only survivor among those who had seen the bird up close. He had lived in isolation in the Cascade Range Mountains for over 40 years. "Let's go to him," said Samuel decisively. Rachel looked at him with a mixture of fear and determination. "Do you really think he's still alive? If he is, it's our only chance to understand before it's too late." And it was at that moment that Rachel's phone rang. It was Emily Vargas. "I heard him. My son. I heard him calling me. Inside the walls." The call dropped immediately afterwards. Rachel and Samuel looked at each other. Something new was happening, and now the mystery was about to reveal an even darker side, one that didn't just involve a hawk, but something much older and buried deep in the silent foundations of Ashfield. The cold in the Cascade Range Mountains was biting, even for this time of year. The forest was dense, dark, with trees so tall that they seemed to stitch the sky. Samuel drove slowly along a narrow dirt road, the car's headlights illuminating only a few meters ahead. Rachel was in the passenger seat, silently looking at her cell phone. Still no signal. They were following the coordinates left by Agnes in the old newspaper from 1937. The man they were looking for was Elliot Marlowe, now 95, according to census records. He lived alone in an isolated cabin high up on the mountain. He was the last recorded survivor who claimed to have seen the hawk up close and lived to tell about it. When they arrived, the morning light could barely pierce the mist. The house was made of dark, old wood, covered in moss. There was no electricity or any sign of technology. In the garden, there were small statues made of twigs and feathers. One of them vaguely resembled the shape of a bird, but with human arms. Samuel knocked on the door. Nothing. He tried again. Silence. Maybe he already... The door opened slowly with a slow creak, revealing a stooped man with deep-set eyes and skin as wrinkled as old paper. "You took your time," he said in a hoarse voice. Samuel and Rachel looked at each other. "Mr. Marlowe, we're..." "I know who you are. You saw the hawk. You're marked now. Get inside." The hut smelled of smoke and earth. On the walls, more symbols. The circle with the eye in the center was drawn in charcoal in at least 3 different places. Rachel felt a shiver run down her back. "What is it?" Samuel asked. Elliot sat down with difficulty and pointed to a pile of old books, maps, and handwritten diaries. "What he is what he's always been. A guardian, a reaper, a sentinel. Call him what you will. He chooses, he watches, he marks, and then he takes it. Takes it where? Rachel asked, in a more skeptical tone than she wanted to show. Elliot looked at her for long seconds. Do you think these houses are random? That these people are unlucky? No. Each house, each victim, was marked before they were even born. He pulled out an old map of Ashfield from long before the town was founded. There were strange drawings above the area where the houses that had been the victims of the disappearances now stood. In the past, this land was considered cursed by the native peoples. They avoided camping here. They said that the eye from above watched those who stepped on this ground. A spirit, or perhaps an entity that feeds on pain, on loss, and it always appears in the form of a bird, a hawk. But it's not a bird, it's a manifestation of it. Rachel narrowed her eyes. Are you saying that this thing is real, and that it chooses who will suffer? Not only does it suffer, whoever is chosen disappears. But before that, it goes mad. Samuel remained silent. He was processing everything. Until he asked, why is he flying over my house? Elliot looked at him steadily. Because it's your turn, or that of someone you love. Rachel stood up, trying to stay calm. This is madness. We can't fight a legend. We need real proof. You want proof? Go to the woods south of town, near Bear Creek Lake. There you'll find the first recorded victim, from 1894. Samuel's eyes widened. Are you saying that it started over a century ago? Elliot nodded. And he's never stopped. It just sleeps and wakes up. From time to time it returns, always the same way. The circling flight, the eye mark, and the disappearances. Before they left, Elliot handed Samuel a small notebook with handwritten records of all the occurrences since the 1930s. One detail caught Rachel's eye. All the houses marked formed a huge circle on the city map. The last point of that circle, Samuel's house. On the way back, they stopped to investigate the place Elliot had indicated, the southern part of town, near Bear Creek. It was a forested area, closed off, almost abandoned. With flashlights and backpacks, they advanced to a hidden clearing. There, they found something that looked like an ancient stone altar covered in dried leaves and moss. In the center, the same symbol of the eye was precisely engraved. Rachel knelt down. Samuel, there's something down here. Removing the earth, they found a very old metal box with a rusty lock. When they opened it, they found old photos, small bones, a giant feather, and an almost illegible diary. But what struck them most was a photograph. An old house, with a dark, hawk-like figure in the sky, circling just above it. On the back of the photo, a handwritten sentence. The mark is the warning. The flight is the sentence. When they got back to the car, the sky was already dark. Samuel was silent. So was Rachel. The weight of the discoveries was overwhelming. On the way back, Rachel's phone rang. It was the city hospital. Miss Miller, you need to come here. Emily Vargas. She's been admitted. She's catatonic. She kept repeating the same thing before she stopped talking altogether. What? He's inside. The hawk got into the house. He's already there. Samuel looked at Rachel, who was still holding the phone. He's not just watching anymore, Rachel. He's gone inside, and the next house is mine. The days following Emily Vargas's collapse plunged the town of Ashfield into an eerie silence. There was no more talk of the missing. There was no more talk of the hawk. And no one, absolutely no one, mentioned Samuel Grady's name. Samuel himself was no longer sleeping properly. He lay awake all night, watching the sky from his balcony with his gun in his lap. The hawk had no longer flown over his house, but it had left something behind. It started with small sounds. Whispers coming from the walls, the creaking of the attic floor as if someone was walking on it. Heavy breathing outside the window, and the worst of all, a beak, knocking on the kitchen window. Always at 3 in the morning. Rachel tried to persuade him to leave the house. Stay at my place for a few days. You need to rest, Sam. If I leave, he'll follow me. And if he follows me, He'll find somewhere else to score, she replied, her eyes deep, as if she hadn't slept for weeks. She tried to change the subject to calm him down. What about the diary? Have you read it all? Samuel took the old notebook out of his pocket. The pages were almost falling apart, but the content was clear. The entries ranged from 1935 to 1972. Names, dates, addresses. All the victims of the Hawk were listed there. But on the last page, there was something different. A name Rachel had never heard before. Gabriel Grady, she read aloud. Samuel remained motionless. That's my father's name. Rachel turned to him in surprise. Your father? But he died when I was 7. A fire in the house where we lived. I always thought it was an accident. My mother never wanted to talk about it. She said it was fate. Rachel picked up the diary again. The entry read, Gabriel Grady, last marked cycle, couldn't resist, signal closed, new wait until new call. Samuel, your father was the last recorded victim. That was in 72. And now, 50 years later, the cycle has begun again. Samuel's hands were shaking. He sat on the sofa, staring into nothingness. So that was it. I thought retiring would take me away from the horrors, but this thing, it was already in my blood. That night, Rachel insisted on spending time with him. She wouldn't leave him alone. They set up cameras inside and outside the house. They put tape recorders in every room, and they took it in turns to keep watch. At 2:43 in the morning, Rachel, half awake, heard a metallic noise coming from the basement. She went down slowly. The place was completely dark. When she turned on the flashlight, she saw it. The symbol of the eye was scrawled in charcoal on one of the stone walls. Fresh, fresh, as if someone or something had done it that night. And then she heard a child's voice. Mommy? Did you find me? It was the voice of Emily's son. She froze. Danny? Is that you? But there was no reply. Just the sound of rapid footsteps and a loud sound behind her. Clack, the basement door closing on its own. Rachel shouted for Samuel, who ran downstairs and pulled her out. When they turned on all the lights and searched the basement, nothing was there, not the mark, no voice, no footprints. This isn't about apparitions anymore, said Rachel, panting. He's inside the house, inside your head. He uses voices, memories. He manipulates. Samuel looked at the wall where there was now only concrete. My father said that once. Before he died, he started hearing voices, seeing things. He said it was the Hawk. I thought he was mad. Rachel approached with a grave expression. What if he wasn't? The next day, Rachel decided to visit Samuel's mother, now in a nursing home for elderly people with cognitive problems. Samuel resisted, but eventually agreed. The woman with faded eyes and slow speech didn't recognize Rachel immediately. But when she heard the name Gabriel Grady, something changed. Her eyes opened and for an instant came back into focus. He tried to protect the boy, but the Hawk had already taken his soul. What boy, Mrs. Grady? Rachel asked, confused. Samuel, he wasn't supposed to be here. He was marked the day he was born. But Gabriel, he did something forbidden. He changed his name. He hid him from the cycle. That's why the Hawk disappeared for so many years. Rachel swallowed. He hid you? At that moment, Samuel entered the room, and his mother saw him. You finally arrived. The cycle came back because of you? Samuel couldn't speak. His mother just continued, in a whisper. He just wants balance. He only takes what has been marked. You ran away for 50 years, but now he wants what's his. Rachel left the clinic with Samuel in silence. When they got into the car, she couldn't stand it any longer. You were saved as a child. That's why the cycle stopped. But now he's found you. He's been hunting you all this time, and now he's settling the score. Samuel kept his eyes fixed on the road. I'm going to put an end to this, one way or another. That night, he left Rachel safely in a hotel outside the city. He returned home alone. He put the camera on the revolver on the table, and sat on the balcony. At 3 in the morning on the dot, the hawk landed on the railing. For the first time, it didn't fly away. It just stood there, staring at him. Samuel felt a crushing pressure in his chest. The bird was real, but not only that. It was as if the air around it had become denser, as if time had stopped. Samuel, with difficulty, spoke. "Take me, but leave the others." The hawk tilted its head, as if it understood. Then, with a flapping of its wings so powerful that it knocked over chairs, it flew off. But something was left behind. On the balcony floor, a black feather, and the old teddy bear from when Samuel was a child. The same toy he burned with his father almost 50 years ago. Rachel couldn't sleep that night in the hotel. She felt she had left Samuel alone at a time when he needed it most. When dawn broke, she got in the car and drove straight back to Ashfield. But as soon as he crossed the entrance to the town, he noticed something strange. The town was empty. The streets, always discreetly busy on Saturday mornings, were deserted. No cars, not a soul alive. The windows were closed, the shops locked, and worse, the sky, usually clear at this time of year, was covered in dense grey clouds which swirled slowly over a single point in the city, Samuel's house. When he got there, the gate was open. The porch was empty. The black feather still on the floor, next to the teddy bear. Rachel walked in quietly, her hand on the holster of her gun. She called out, "Samuel, it's me. Are you there?" Nothing. She walked slowly up the stairs, room by room. The house was silent, but something seemed out of place. The paintings were crooked. The windows were covered with sheets. And on the wall in the hallway, the symbol of the eye had been drawn in red paint, repeated dozens of times on every wall. Rachel stopped in front of Samuel's room. The door was ajar. She pushed it slowly. Inside, sitting on the floor with his back to the door, was Samuel. He was holding Elliot's diary and staring at the wall, where there was a single word written in charcoal. Choice. Rachel approached. "Sam, what's going on?" He turned his face slowly. He was pale, deep-set eyes, unshaven, but he seemed lucid. "I get it, Rachel. I understand everything. The hawk. He's not the end. It's just the beginning. A harbinger." She knelt down in front of him. "What does that mean?" Samuel pointed to the open diary in her hand. It was a hidden page, stuck together with old adhesive tape. When Rachel read it, she felt her stomach turn. "In each generation, one will be marked. If he runs away, others will pay. If he accepts, the cycle ends." Are you saying that if you give in, all this stops? Not only that, I can see it now. He's entered me, into my memories. He showed me everything that will happen if I resist. Rachel tried to stop him. "No, this can't depend on a sacrifice. There must be another way. There is always another way." But Samuel had already made up his mind. That night he left detailed instructions for Rachel. He told her where to hide all the records, where to deliver Elliot's diary, and which route to take to get out of Ashfield before dawn. She resisted. She cried. She shouted at him. "You can't do this. I won't let you. You have to. I was the wrong cog in the wheel. I ran away as a child. Now he wants to close the loop." Rachel looked into his eyes, and at that moment she understood that there was no turning back. Samuel said goodbye to her with a firm hug, a long one, the quietest of all. And then, like a man going to his own trial, he walked off into the woods, alone. Hours later, Rachel stood on top of the hill to the south of the town, watching from afar. The sky above the forest swirled like a dark whirlpool. Soundless rays tore through the clouds, and in the center, hovering in the air, the hawk. It flew in faster circles, lower, as if it were waiting, and then Samuel appeared in the clearing, with his arms open, unarmed, ready. The hawk swooped down, but not like a bird. During its flight, its body began to change. Its feathers expanded. Its wings took on an almost human shape. Its eyes glowed a deep red, impossible to describe. And when it landed in front of Samuel, it was no longer an animal. It was something between the real and the mythical, an entity with the appearance of a bird, but with a human presence. Samuel didn't back down. "I'm the last one, right?" The entity merely inclined its head, and for the first time, it spoke. "You're the delay, but also the key." Its voice was not that of a being. It was a combination of voices, male and female, old, childish, young, all at the same time. Samuel knelt down. "If you want to end this, just take me." And then the creature advanced. Rachel shouted from the hill, but her voice didn't reach the clearing. The second the entity touched Samuel, the sky exploded in light. A silent explosion of energy swept through the forest, and then everything stopped. The wind stopped, the clouds dissipated, and the hawk disappeared. Rachel ran to the clearing, but she found no body, no blood, only Samuel's clothes folded carefully on a rock. Next to it, Elliot's diary, now with a new page, handwritten. "The cycle is closed for the first time. Someone has chosen sacrifice." The following week, the city began to return to normal. The missing did not return, but the whispers stopped. The hawk was no longer seen, and no one heard any more knocks on the glass in the early hours of the morning. Rachel left Ashfield soon after, carrying the diary and a promise. "I will tell this story the right way." She knew people wouldn't believe her, but that didn't matter, because now she knew one thing for sure. The hawk wasn't a creature, it was a balance, and the balance, for now, had been restored. 3 months have passed since the hawk was last seen in the skies over Ashfield, and since then, the town has lived in a strange state of normality. People have gone out again. Children have returned to playing in the streets. The shopkeepers opened their doors as if nothing had happened. But there was something in their gazes, a silent caution, a weight that would not dissipate either with time or the sun. It was as if everyone knew that something terrible had ended, but they didn't want to admit that it had. Rachel Miller, for her part, didn't go back to her routine. She resigned from the Ashfield police force and moved to Eugene, a town to the south. She rented a small apartment near the train station and spent her days immersed in research, connecting the dots between the files left by Samuel and Elliot Marlowe's diary. With each note, she understood better what had happened. The cycle seemed to follow a ritualistic logic, with patterns of time, place, and blood. Samuel had been the flaw in the pattern, and his decision not to run away as before, but to confront the entity, was what broke that cycle. But there was something Rachel still didn't fully understand. The symbol, the eye inside the circle, appeared in several ancient documents. She found it in Native American archives, records of European settlers, and even in hidden structures on old maps of the United States. It was older than Ashfield, older than any town in the region. "This was never about a town," she said, jotting it down in her notebook. "It's about the territory." Meanwhile, in the psychiatric hospital where Emily Vargas had been admitted, the doctors began to notice signs of improvement. She was talking again, but she only said one sentence, over and over again. "He's gone," because someone finally stayed. Danny, her son, was never found, but the voice that tormented her stopped, and in the next bed, a new patient was admitted. A man who claimed to have seen a giant bird flying over his house in a town more than 200 kilometers from Ashfield. But as Rachel examined the reports, she realized something. He was lying. It was pure delirium. There was no pattern. There was no sequence. There was no more presence. The cycle was really over. One day, Rachel received an envelope with no sender. Inside was a single sheet of paper in Samuel's handwriting. It must have been written before the sacrifice. "If you're reading this, it's because it worked. Don't look for me. I don't want to be remembered for the end. I want you to remember the beginning, the hawk, the flight, and the choice. This world is sustained by small decisions that no one sees. Someone somewhere always chooses to stay. This time, it was me. Take care of what's left. Samuel, she cried, alone, in silence. And the next day, she drove to Ashfield one last time. At the entrance to the town, she placed a small wooden plaque next to the dirt road. She wrote on it with a knife, "Here, a man chose to face danger." In Ashfield, Hank, the old neighbor, still watered his garden every day. When asked about the hawk, he just replied, "He's not coming back. Someone has already paid the bill." The town's old museum has been renovated. A small space has been created to tell local legends. There, among ancient artifacts and maps of the territory, was a photo of Samuel Grady. No description, no date, just him standing in front of the house where it all began. And in the corner of the picture, in the background, a shadow was cast on the clouds. It wasn't clear, it wasn't defined, but it had shape, as if the story wasn't completely over. Rachel published everything in the form of a report, not as proof, but as a warning. She didn't use real names or exact places. She called the text, "The hawk that flies in circles always announces doom. Anyone who wants to understand it will," she said, closing her laptop. And that night, before she went to sleep, she heard something familiar in the sky, a faint sound, like the flapping of wings. She ran to the window, but there was nothing, apart from a single circle drawn on the foggy glass at dawn. 2 years had passed. Rachel Miller now lived in Boulder, Colorado, in a simple house surrounded by pine trees and low hills. She devoted herself entirely to writing and studying unexplained phenomena. Her book, The Circling Hawk Always Announces Doom, was published as fiction, even though every page contained the truths she had experienced. It sold poorly. Few read it, even fewer believed it. But that didn't bother her, because somewhere between the words, she had left codes, dates, symbols, little clues, as if to say silently, "If you've seen it, then you know." One cloudy fall morning, Rachel received a letter, handwritten, yellowed paper, no return address. Inside a single sheet of paper, "The black feather is back. Now it has fallen in front of my daughter's house. I need to know if this is a new beginning or just a memory. Signed, Agnes." Rachel folded the letter slowly. She took a deep breath. She went to the cupboard and took out a wooden box locked with a padlock. Inside were the original entries from Elliot Marlowe's diary, copies of Samuel's files, the photograph of the figure above the house, and a single feather kept in a glass tube, the same one that the hawk had left on Samuel's balcony, the same one that Rachel kept there to remember. She picked up the tube carefully. She looked at it against the light. The feather was falling apart, not like something that rots, but like something that was being taken away, as if time or some invisible force was erasing its existence. Rachel felt her stomach tighten. That could mean two things: the definitive end of the entity, or the start of a new cycle. On the outskirts of Ashfield, the town seemed as peaceful as ever. Samuel's house had been sold to a young family with 3 children. During a renovation, they found the small teddy bear that had belonged to him buried in the yard. The mother kept it as a souvenir. She thought it was cute. The youngest boy, aged 5, was holding the toy when he asked, "Mom, why is that big bird flying in circles up there?" His mother laughed, absent-mindedly without looking. "There's no bird, dear." But the boy continued to stare at the sky, seriously. "He's looking for someone." And then he ran into the house. Rachel took one last look at the feather inside the tube. Now all that was left was dust. She took out a new notebook, opened to the first page, and wrote calmly, "If the hawk comes back, someone needs to be ready to make the choice." She closed the notebook, and this time she wasn't afraid, because she knew that when the circling flight began again, it would no longer be an omen of doom. It would be a test, and the answer is already written. What did you think of this outcome? Leave your opinion in the comments. We'd love to know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like to support our work. See you in the next video.